Hey there, drone fans. Rick here again from Drone Valley. In today's clip, I'd like to give you 5 tips on the proper care and feeding of your DJI batteries. Now, extra batteries are probably the first accessory that most of us run out and buy the minute we start flying because we realize we really like being up in the air, and to extend that flight time, you're going to need a second, a third, maybe even a fourth battery. The challenge is that these accessories are hands down the most expensive ones you're going to buy, and in a lot of ways the most sensitive as well. And what I mean by that is the way you care for these batteries, the way you store them, charge them, and transport them can dramatically impact not only how long this battery keeps your quad up in the air, but how long you can use that battery over the life of the quad. So taking really good care of your batteries means you can extend the investment you've made in that accessory and get as much flight time as possible when you're up in the air. So what I'm going to give you today are 5 what I'll call golden rules of taking care of the batteries and making sure you don't abuse them and you're not bad to them, and that way they'll take care of you when you're up there flying. The first thing I'm going to discuss is the intelligence in the batteries. Now, DJI calls all these batteries intelligent. I've got a grouping here of Spark, this is the Mavic Air, Mavic Pro, Mavic 2, and Phantom 4. All of these share an intelligent controller. So inside the battery, there's actually a circuit board that's monitoring all the behaviors of the batteries. Now that's different from a lot of quads that are out there. So if you're an old school RC flyer, most of the older quads, and especially the inexpensive quads that are out today, use what I'll call a dumb battery. It's just a lipo cell or a grouping of lipo cells. And to charge that battery, you have to have a really smart charger. So the brains are in the charger that actually push the electrons at that battery. It's monitoring how the battery is being charged. And if it's a multi-cell battery, it'll balance the cells out. DJI flipped the script. They took that intelligence and built it into the battery. So in a lot of ways, these are smart batteries with a dumb charger, which means that charger just turns AC to DC at the right current and voltage, fires those electrons at the batteries, and then the batteries themselves, because of the charging board, keep track of how those cells are being charged, how they're being balanced, is the temperature right, how many times have you charged it. And that's super important because while you're flying, the minute you power up your quad, the battery and the quad are talking to each other. There's a conversation going on between the two of them, and if you've done bad things to the battery, it's going to rat you out in a heartbeat to that quad. It's going to let the quad know, hey, you know, the last time he charged me, it was really, really hot out, and all my cells aren't balanced, so we can't quite fly as far as he wants to fly today because he was a knucklehead, so we're going to have to come back sooner. So you want to take care of the battery so that this is your best friend. You want to make sure he is happy when you're up there in the air. So the first tip I'll talk about is the error conditions, because all of us are going to run into error conditions over time. Now, there's a couple of ways you can figure out what's going wrong with the battery. There's hard and soft errors. Hard errors are errors that you can't use the battery. If you put it in the quad, either it won't power up because there's lights blinking, or the quad's going to report a catastrophic error on the battery. A lot of those you can't clear, and usually they'll happen because you've gotten the battery in water or dirt, or there's a short, or you've done something terrible to the battery. And in that case, you may not be able to recover that battery. The soft errors, in a lot of cases, you can clear. Sometimes it'll be a matter of just letting the battery either warm up or cool down if you've taken it to extreme temperatures, or maybe you've got to clean out the contacts on the end with a toothbrush to make sure that if you've got dirt in there or debris, you've cleaned that out. There's one condition called an unbalanced cell condition, and the way you can retrieve that error is when you go into the DJI Go 4 application, you go to the battery page and you look at the graphic that's there, and you'll see this is a 3 cell, that's a 4 cell. If you look at the cells, you should see, just like glasses of water, you should see all those cells pretty much balanced out across each other. It isn't really important how much they're charged, just that the charge is equal across them. If you look at those cells and maybe 2 of them are good and 1 of them's a little bit lower, you've got an unbalanced cell. Now, in a lot of cases, the intelligent controller can fix that for you on the next charge or over the next grouping of charges, but sometimes it can't. Sometimes it's so different that it can't actually balance that out. It keeps track of how the batteries are charged, so what you have to do is you have to reset that counter, and the only way to do that is to actually run the battery down to dead, meaning fly it as long as you can, let it sit or let it hover till you get down to 5%, then just leave the quad on. Now what'll happen is the battery will eventually blink out. And I know a lot of people at this point are panicking because they're thinking, gee, you can never let a lipo cell go dead. These lipo cells won't go dead completely because the intelligent controller in there will only let them get down to about a 10% reservoir of charge, and then it'll shut down. So there's still 10% in the lipo cell. Even though the battery looks dead, the lipo still got a charge in it. If you bring it down to that, I'll call it reset level, and then charge it again, that resets that calculation for how those cells are balanced. So I've had to do that a few times because I break my own rules, right? I charge it too hot, or I take it and charge it in the garage on a cold night, and then those cells start misbehaving. So that's a good way to reset those error conditions. Now, there's a bunch of other error conditions around overcurrent, overvoltage, short circuit, over temperature, and I've done extensive clips on checking those against the manual, and I've got links below to some of the manuals. You can check them out. But if you've got error conditions, read the LEDs. They'll either be on solid or they'll be blinking, and through the pattern you've got on your battery, you can go to that chart and find out exactly what's going wrong. Next thing I'll talk about is protection and storage, and this is really important. I fly with a lot of flyers out there, and I'm constantly mentioning to them, what are you doing with that battery? Like you're not taking care of your battery by taking, say, a Phantom 4 battery that's got the connections on the bottom and setting it down in tall grass. Think about what's going to happen to the bottom of that battery. You're going to get grass blades up in there that have moisture on them. You may get dirt up inside there. And the thing is, you're not going to know that right away. So you're going to use this for a couple of weeks and not have an issue, but all that debris is going to get transferred to the quad inside when you're flying, and you're going to damage the connections between the two. And over time, if those copper connections get tarnished, all of a sudden that connection you're making can't conduct as much current as the quad needs to fly. And you're going to get flaky voltage readings. You may have the quad, come out of the sky because the batteries failed. So you've got to take care of the batteries, not only when you're putting them down or when you're transporting them. And what I recommend is, the only danger with these is the case is really strong, so you're not going to pierce the case typically. But if you just throw this in the back of your car or your trunk or your bag, all these contacts are exposed, and I guarantee you're going to get fuzz and debris and other things in there. So what I like to do, and a lot of people call me conservative with this, is I'll use a battery bag. I love these battery bags because they protect the quad batteries from any kind of damage in the car. And this one's set for the Mavic. There's different size battery bags for each of the quad batteries that are out there, but that's what it does for you. And what this bag does is two things. Number one, it protects the battery from any kind of damage when it's bouncing around inside your car or it's inside your bag. The second thing it does is these are fire retardant, because these LiPo batteries have the propensity to burst into flames if they're abused. So if you pierce the outside skin or you get it wet, those two chemicals mix, you get a LiPo fire, and that LiPo fire is intense. It burns till it's out of chemicals, and it burns insanely hot. There's very little chance of you putting that out once it starts. So I've never had that happen, but if you go on YouTube and you search LiPo fires, you'll be shocked at how hot those things burn. So I like using these kind of bags because they're a couple of bucks, protects my $100 battery from abuse in the car. The other thing I like to do is use what I call these end cap protectors, which basically are little rubber things that fit on the battery to cover those connections. Now that's an extra step I like to take. So I put that on there, I throw it inside the LiPo cell, and then I know for sure that it's not going to get wet, it's not going to get dirty, it's not going to get broken when it's in the back of my car. It's fire protected. If something goes non-linear in the battery when it's inside there, it'll minimize the amount of damage it creates. Then when I pull it out, I don't have to worry if I put this thing down on the ground that those connections are going to get dirty from dirt or debris or whatever else is around me at the time. So protection's really important. I actually store those in the bags when I'm home, and a lot of times I'll use a foam case when I'm traveling, so I'll put these in there folded up, and then when I pull it out and charge it, I'll actually open the end of this, slide the cell into it, make the connection to it, and charge it while I'm actually in the bag. Just in case something goes crazy with it, I've got a little bit of fire protection built in. And again, we have these on the website. You can find them a lot of different places, but I would recommend strongly looking into some LiPo bags, looking at these end cap protectors, and typically we sell them as a set of 3 for the batteries and 1 for the quad, because if you're taking the battery out of the quad, you want to protect the quad as well. All right, so the next thing I'll talk about is charging. Now this is super important because a lot of people don't realize the temperature you charge these batteries can have a dramatic impact on how well they charge and what kind of damage can occur. So I call it the Goldilocks zone. And now there's all kinds of temperatures specified in the manuals about how hot it can be charged and how cold it can be charged and when it can be used. My rule of thumb is if it's fine for me, it's fine for the batteries, which means if I'm cold, probably don't charge the batteries. If I'm too hot, don't charge the batteries. Don't charge them in your garage, because in the summertime it's going to get really hot. In the wintertime it's going to get really cold. And even though they'll charge, you're doing damage to them. And over time, that's going to really cut down on the useful life of the battery. It may actually cut down on the flight time pretty dramatically. So my rule of thumb is if it's warm enough for me and I'm comfortable, I'll charge the batteries in that environment. So I'll bring them in the house, charge them in the office, charge them in the rec room or whatever, where I'm near them and I can actually know that the temperature is reasonable. But that's super important. I also would worry about charging them in the car. A lot of people like using car chargers. I do as well. If I'm going to charge a battery in the car, I typically only do that when I'm driving between locations. The worst thing you can do is put a battery on a charger while it's sitting in your driveway and then forget about it. If that sits all day in that hot car, you're going to come out and the battery's going to be damaged. And the way you'll know that, and again, DJI did a great job of this, they've got plastic casing outside of it to protect it. There's smaller sections down the bottom here that are softer. So when this battery fails, and it gets too hot or too cold, it'll swell. And you'll notice it'll swell typically at the bottom. So if you see bulging down here, there's nothing you can do to save that battery. At that point, take it to a battery recycling center and call it a day. You've got to order a new one. Never fly with a swollen battery. That's a recipe for disaster, because as much as you hate losing a $100 battery, losing a $1,000 quad because you're flying with that defective battery is a whole lot more painful, trust me. The last thing I'll talk about is an accessory that I love to take with me. It's a charging brick, and I'm sure I've talked about this before on different clips that I've done, but the charging brick allows you to use batteries that maybe you've flown with a little bit but still have a charge in them to charge other devices. And basically this slides on the end of the battery. Now if you bought the Flymore combination, for this guy or this guy. You actually got that charging brick with that Fly More combination, but I like that because it allows me to take the battery, turn it on, and now I've got two USB-A connections on the end that I can use to charge my phone or my tablet or my controller. In some cases, if it's been a long day of flying, I'll actually take one of my batteries that's down to 15% or whatever, put the end brick on it, put a cable in here, connect it to my controller, slide this in my pocket, and it extends the light of my Mavic or Mavic Pro controller for the rest of the afternoon. So I like having accessories like this with me so I can use those to charge other devices and really get a lot of useful life out of this. And that's pretty much the last tip I had. Now, I love talking about this kind of stuff, and what I've given you today is kind of a quick tips clip that I put together just to give you the basic information. I'm trying to make these clips shorter because a lot of you guys don't like the longer clips, even though I love doing those because I can give you more detail. But hopefully I gave you information that's helpful out there in the field. I love flying. I know you guys love flying. So anything I can do to help you fly longer and safer is definitely something I want to talk about. So let me know if you have any questions. Drop them in the comments below. And again, I'm having a lot of fun putting these clips together, as I say every time. As long as you guys are finding value in them, I'm going to continue to do them. So thanks all for watching. I've got some links down below if you want to pick up any of these accessories. I've got those on the website. But either way, thanks again. And until next time, happy flying.